Hello everybody and welcome. Today I'd like to go over something a little different. A couple months ago I bought a WeCreate Vision, the 20 watt model that was available at the time. And I've done a couple modifications to it to help out usability for me. I am a hobbyist, so I don't use this for production or income. It's just to make things easier. Stenciling, labeling, router jigs or router templates are some of the bigger things I use it for. But I'd like to go over 4 things that I've kind of figured out, some with help, some without. And the easiest one, and we're going to go with first, is the bed clips for the knife blades. Now, anybody who's used this knows it's not the honeycomb pattern that you can use automotive clips with. I need to be a little bit different. I think X-Tool may have some clips that go with this. I'm not positive. Magnets will work if they don't get in your way. But I did find an individual online on printables.com, Jekamis, I believe how it's pronounced. It may be an abbreviation or shortened form of their name. I'll put a link in the description. But they came out with 3D printed versions of knife clips that you could use for the bed. I don't have a 3D printer yet, so I ended up making my own by a laser cutting file, which is based directly off of his. I'm not going to provide plans for these because they are his design, but as you can see I've got 2 forms. These go on the sides and mount in. Since these are made out of plywood, I consider them to be consumables. Then I have these clips that are actually have a glued on piece for securing at the top. And they just have a little bit of spring tension built into them from where they've been cut, and they'll help hold the piece on the edges. Next one, for anybody who's a WeCreate, may notice already, is I've added additional lighting. So I've got the covers removed up on the installed lighting at the moment, but as you can see it's just LED strips adhered in place. I have some aftermarket LED strips that I've adhered along the inside. The front panels are curved, so you can do it as one single strip the entire length around. It's a 12 volt DC system. I've got it tucked in up here in the corner. There's a little gap there. You still need to be careful when closing the lid. As you can see, that power cord is tucked behind and comes out. There is a pinch point. You need to watch out back here, especially with the power connector, to make sure you don't interfere with your actual travel of the laser. And then you also have this little cable route. It runs the cables through here. There's a spot right back here. It's right on the edge of it, but as long as it's hereed flush, the model I picked up doesn't interfere. So that helps out a great deal with lighting, especially if you're using the WeCreate software. When you open the lid, those lights turn off, so everything's dark. That's a simple modification. Tucks up through the corner, doesn't interfere with anything, and gives all nice lighting for the bed. Third thing I want to discuss is I've installed a draft table. It's hard to see, but it's just pegboard under there. And I've got it coming out through a 4-inch duct. And I also have my WeCreate exhaust port tucked in. I turned an adapter to go from the existing adapter on the back of it, which is 2.5–3 inches. I don't recall what the numbers are, but then fits into the side of this dryer vent. And those come down. I have them tied into an 8-inch inline exhaust fan I found on Amazon. I'll add that in the description below. I've got it coming off of a 4-inch to 6-inch splitter because I couldn't find 4-inch to 8-inch or another way to adapt that. So there is a little bit of epoxying involved, and that's also why it has the HVAC tape down there. Make sure I've got a good seal. Then I got that trunk going out. I've got it hooked up to a panel that I can put into my sliding glass door conveniently when I need it, so I can just have it exhausted outside. What I did find though was when I was running that unit, the installed fan, which is already a very high-pitched noise, was going much higher as the additional flow was being pulled through it. and I think it was acting as a flow restriction. So I have removed that fan. It requires removal of these 3 screws for this expanding cover to come out of the way. Then you have these 2 additional screws. Once you do that and you get to the back, there's 4 bolts holding the fan onto that screen. I recommend putting everything back in there so that can cover up the port when the cover's down. To unplug the fan, it's run behind this panel and then plugged in into this corner over here. And there's a couple screws, those 2 there, and then there's one underneath this connector, and you have to unplug this connector to get that panel out of the way. It's not really a problem to get to it, but just keep in mind which wires you're unplugging. It is labeled on my circuit board as fan, so it's relatively obvious because it was a black and white wire, black and red wire with a single connector going into the fan. And it is taped on the back of the panel where the PCB is mounted. Not an issue to pull it off until you get to about here where the antenna wire comes off the board and goes back. You need to be careful where those 2 interfere so you don't damage your antenna wire when you do that, if you choose to. And I found that to help out as well with the airflow. It really did seem like there was an air restriction with the setup I have. And the downdraft table is to help out with anything that gets by down this way. It helps pull it in through the sides. So it's kind of maybe difficult to see, but there is a gap there, so it'll pull the air in and down into the table to help out with that some. And now for the interesting one. I figured out how to hook up the installed camera to USB to my laptop so I can use it in Lightburn. I am not going to stay with that. I don't like the quality of that camera in that setup. I don't know if it's the way I had to configure it, and I'll show that in a moment. And it's also why these covers, the other reason the covers are off the lights. What I do recommend is the Clack Shack on YouTube recently put out a good video on how he put a camera mounted onto the glass back here in a little enclosure and ran it out through the same gap there. As you can see, there's another cord coming through here other than the lights, and that is actually the camera hooked into USB. So let me put this lid down and I'll bring you back in just a moment. Alright, now that I've got that, so one of the more difficult things with this was actually removing this lid. In order to get to the camera and any mounting, as you can see it's screwed in through the top as well as the camera mount there. I had to pry that cover off. It is held in by adhesive pads. They do not go all the way around the perimeter, but they are, as you can see right there, placed strategically. One of the pads there is still adhered here. I was able to find a spot where it was not adhered well, and I was able to push up and then wedge around it gently as I worked it out of the way. Heating pad or something like that may have helped to soften those up. Now that I know how it was set up, it would, I think, made it a little bit easier. But it did come out well. This is not glass, it is a poly of some sort, so there is some flexibility to it. Once I started working with it, I wasn't really concerned about damaging it, but that is something to take into consideration. Now, onto the fun part. I am going to have some close-up pictures of this camera uninstalled to show connections and everything. As you can see, it's a 5-wire connection. This is USB. There is a model number on it. It is QQSJ9031 version 2. I could find no information on the version 2 online, but the original version or unversioned model, there is some very basic information and indicated that it was USB 2.0 plug and play. So the other side, mine does indicate what each of the pinouts is for this board. So I was able to take an existing USB and solder it to an adapter to fit into here. This connector 5-pin is a 1.25 millimeter pitch, which is the distance between the pins measured there on the front. I could find nothing for a USB to that type of connector. Everything I found was a 1.5 millimeter pitch or maybe a 2.0 pitch, which makes this connector significantly larger and not work with that model. I couldn't find any adapters either. So I did have to make my own cable, and that may be one of the reasons why I'm not getting as clear of an image as I would like to out of it. I did test my connections with an ohm meter for continuity, and everything worked well. I can pull the camera up, so as you can see, let's see if we can pull out a little bit so you can see both. You can see I do have it hooked up. But like I said, I really wasn't getting the quality I wanted out of that, especially compared to what the Clack Shack was able to do with his adding an aftermarket camera in there. So I will be removing mine, and I've made a mount for an aftermarket camera, so it'll be mounted in roughly the same position as what's here now. I will try to get it lined up so that the camera replaces what's there. So it works. I don't think it works well. There was a lot of work involved to get to it. Like I said, you had to take the lid off. I had to make my own custom cable. I had to validate the pinout matched what I needed it to. And then I took the risk of making sure my connections were correct when I plugged it into the computer. I did a lot of back and forth, so I was fairly confident enough to do that. But those are risks that I had to take. And if we pull up Lightburn, I can show camera. It comes up as the ArduCam USB camera, and I've got to close it out of this, I believe. There we go. So ArduCam USB camera, and we can update the overlay. So it does come in. It's just not, especially when you zoom in, it's not really good detail for trying to get high accuracy. I was able to burn the bottom of one of the bowls I had turned to put my maker's mark on there. It did work out well for that. You do need to be careful with the auto adjust for the Z-axis. For anybody who hasn't seen that, that did not port over with the Lightburn capability, just like the camera didn't port over. However, there is a command that worked. I will add that to the description as well as also to where I found it. There was a Lightburn forum that had it, and there was another individual, I believe, on YouTube that had that listed, that showed how it worked. And the one capability I have left that I would like to see, and if anybody knows how to do this, I would appreciate some input. When I do the Lightburn fire, cancel out of that. So if I use the fire button, or if I have it set up to frame and fire, it locks up. I have to close out Lightburn and start it back up again. And when it's running normally, it'll turn on the autofocus laser, which is roughly in this position, so it doesn't give you an exact center. So if anybody knows a macro that can be done with that, or maybe there's something I'm missing to be able to get that functionality without locking everything up, I'd appreciate some input. Hopefully this helped other people out. I know I'm probably not the only person to pry the lid off of this to figure out how to get it to do what I want it to do, but I figured I'd hadn't seen it anywhere else, so I would share it while I'm thinking about it. You do need to be able to move these wires out of the way to get the camera out, and those are actually hooked to the LED, which I had to unadhere to give myself a little bit of room to move it around. Just another thing to keep in mind when you're doing this if you choose to go down this route. But with that, I think I covered everything I wanted to discuss. I'll add a lot of details in the description, and I hope everybody has a great day. And remember, some of these mods, like disconnecting the fan and messing with the camera, please, you're going to do that at your own risk. There is a potential you could damage something if you're not careful and don't know what you're doing. So if you're not certain, get some help with somebody you think might be experienced in that. And beyond that, everybody, y'all have a great day. Thank you.